The sun rose reluctantly over the jagged peaks of the Rockies, spilling molten gold across the rough-hewn cabins scattered along the foothills. Dust stirred lazily across the worn dirt trails, twisting in the morning light, as if reluctant to disturb the silence of a land that had seen too much cruelty and too little mercy. It was summer, but the heat carried no warmth for those who were weary and hungry, and the wind whispered reminders of the hardships etched into every settler's life. She came into view like a storm incarnate, towering and unwavering, her bare arms corded with muscle from endless labor. Martha, a giant among women, a widow draped in the frayed remnants of a once sturdy dress, moved with the quiet determination of someone who had been forced to raise the world on her shoulders. Her children clung to her skirts, 6 in number, ranging from a tiny infant swaddled in a threadbare blanket to an 8-year-old boy whose eyes mirrored her own defiance and exhaustion. Each step she took left prints in the dust that told a story of survival, one that had been carved with cold nights, meager meals, and the constant shadow of her ex-husband's cruelty. The townsfolk whispered as she passed. "There she goes," some said, eyes wide with a mix of fear and scorn. "The widow with too many mouths to feed." Children pointed, adults shook their heads. Not a soul greeted her with kindness, not a hand offered bread or water. And yet Martha pressed forward, the weight of her son's needs heavier than any fear of ridicule. She had been wandering the edge of the valley all morning, seeking a safe path and something to fill the children's hollow stomachs. Her youngest whimpered in protest against the sun's heat, while her older son scouted for berries and roots with shaky, starving hands. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and distant pine, but there was also something else, a faint scent of hope that seemed too fragile to name. And then he appeared. Jeremiah Calloway, muscular, broad-shouldered, and possessing the kind of presence that could silence a room before a word was spoken, stood atop a ridge overlooking the valley. His hair, dark as iron, fell in waves around a face hardened by the wilderness but softened by a rare gentleness. His eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. When he saw her, the giant widow with her ragged train of children, he did not flinch. Instead, he leaned against a carved post, boots dug into the rocky soil, assessing, weighing, and deciding. He had come for a reason that was practical but not without complexity. His homestead, vast and dangerous in its solitude, required heirs strong enough to carry the work of the land, to wrest survival from the harsh world they inhabited. He saw in her sons potential, raw and unpolished, children who could grow to match the ruggedness of the mountains themselves. And in her he saw strength, a woman who could endure, who could protect, who could challenge him, and perhaps even soften the edges of his solitude. When she arrived at the foot of the ridge, the children panting, their skin burned by the sun and dusted with grime, she hardly noticed him at first. Hunger sharpened her focus, the heat sapped her energy. But then his voice carried down, deep and commanding, yet oddly soothing. "You've come far, and you look like you've carried the world on your shoulders. Come up here. I have water, shade, and food." Martha froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She had been ignored, mocked, and sometimes threatened, but here was a man who saw her, not just her children or her frailty. He extended a hand, not in judgment but in offer, and the oldest boy, cautious yet instinctively protective, met his gaze. Jeremiah's eyes flicked to the children, noting the dirt under their nails, the hunger in their eyes, the way they moved in tandem, a small army forged by necessity. After a tense moment, Martha nodded, and with a strength born of desperation, she hoisted her youngest over her shoulder and began to climb. Each step was heavy, the mountain unforgiving, but Jeremiah stayed at her side, guiding her when a stone shifted beneath her boot, offering support without intrusion. At the summit, he ushered them to a shaded grove where a small spring trickled between rocks, the water sparkling like fragments of glass. He handed them jerky, bread, and dried fruit he had prepared, and for the first time in weeks, Martha watched her children eat without fear. She herself took a piece of jerky, tasting the salt and feeling it ignite warmth inside her hollow chest. They ate in silence at first, but it was a silence full of unspoken understanding. Jeremiah watched her closely, noting the way her eyes scanned the surroundings, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the careful way she protected her children. She was formidable not merely because of size or muscle, but because of will and resilience. "I've been told you have 6 sons," he said, finally breaking the quiet. "They'll need more than food to survive here. They'll need guidance, strength, knowledge. I can teach them to hunt, to track, to endure the winters. They can be part of something larger, something that will give them a future." Martha studied him. Her gaze, sharp, mistrust threaded through the weariness. "And what will I get in return?" she asked, the words edged with both caution and curiosity. Jeremiah smiled, a slow curve that was both charming and unnerving. "Shelter, safety, and someone to stand with you, not over you." It was a proposition that carried the weight of a life-changing choice. She had been alone for too long, hunted by a past husband who delighted in humiliating her, threatened her, and reminded her that her children were never safe. Yet here was a man strong as the mountains themselves, offering her protection, and something she had not dared to hope for, partnership. She hesitated, not out of doubt of her own abilities, but out of instinct. The world had been cruel, and trust came slowly to those who had been betrayed. But her sons were hungry, tired, and yearning for safety. She could not deny the relief in her chest, the fleeting sense of hope that the children might know peace, if only for a little while. Jeremiah extended his hand again. This time she took it, and with the sun climbing higher, she led her small troop of boys into the unknown sanctuary of his homestead. Each step was heavy with uncertainty, but each step was a step away from the shadow of despair. As they settled near the cabin, the children began to explore, marveling at the tools, the livestock, and the small comforts of a life they had never known. Martha, meanwhile, allowed herself a rare moment of ease, leaning against a post and feeling the sun on her skin, the wind teasing her hair. Jeremiah approached, his presence calm and steady, and together they watched the children. It was not love yet, not the kind that seared the soul, but it was connection, a recognition of strength, endurance, and need. And in that recognition, Martha felt something she had thought lost, the possibility of a life where cruelty did not always follow, where her children could grow without constant fear, and where she herself might one day rest her weary heart. The days that followed were a trial, not of survival, but of adaptation. The town still whispered, the neighbors eyed them with suspicion and some outright scorn. But in the mountains among the cliffs and pine, Martha and her sons discovered a rhythm of life that was harsh, yes, but also honest. Jeremiah taught them how to read the wind, track game, and handle firearms with respect, instilling discipline that was tempered with patience. The oldest boys learned quickly, their small frames growing stronger as they chased rabbits through the underbrush, tracked deer through the tall grass, and carried water from a spring to the cabin. The younger ones clung to Martha, watching and imitating, learning the subtle art of endurance from her silent example. Martha herself worked tirelessly, tending gardens, mending clothing, and lifting fallen logs to clear paths. Yet she found moments of levity, teaching her sons songs she had sung to them when their father's shadow loomed, telling stories of the days before hardship, and sometimes laughing with Jeremiah, whose strong hands were as gentle when he carried water as they were when they guided the boys in practice. And yet, the past would not let her fully rest. Her ex-husband had not given up entirely. He had come once, under the guise of trading goods, to remind her that no matter how high the mountains rose, the world still had cruel eyes and heavy hands. He mocked her size, the number of children she bore, and the audacity of her daring to survive alone. Martha's sons, however, now armed with confidence and knowledge, stood firm beside her. They faced him not with fear, but with defiance, and Jeremiah, towering and imposing, made it clear that no harm would touch them here. The confrontation ended quickly, with her ex-husband retreating into the dust and sun, humiliated and enraged. Martha exhaled, relief tempered by lingering tension, and watched her children rally around her, their loyalty unshakable. She realized then that the strength of a family was not merely in muscle, but in unity, trust, and courage. In the quiet evenings, when the work was done and the mountains glowed with the last light of the sun, Martha and Jeremiah would sit by the fire, exchanging stories, glances, and moments of understanding that required no words. Slowly, intimacy crept in, not the fleeting kind born of convenience, but a deep, deliberate knowing that each had endured, survived, and carried scars unseen. Their hands brushed over coals and utensils. Their eyes met in the flicker of firelight, speaking volumes that words could not. It was a fragile love, balanced on trust and respect, built amid the harsh rhythms of frontier life. Martha felt herself soften, allowing laughter, teasing, and the warmth of a man who did not fear her strength. Jeremiah, in turn, found himself humbled by her resilience, captivated by the way she held her sons with both sternness and tenderness, by her ability to endure and still nurture. The town, slowly, could not ignore them entirely. Whispers became conversations. Curiosity replaced derision as neighbors saw the children thriving, strong and capable, and glimpsed the bond between the widow and the mountain man. But judgment lingered, a shadow that neither Martha nor Jeremiah could fully escape. Yet they pressed on, guided by their own sense of right, their own family forged in fire and sweat. Evenings were the hardest, for they carried the memory of the world outside the mountains, of hungry streets, of a father who had humiliated and abandoned them, of the endless struggle to survive. But the children were learning to fight, not with cruelty, but with courage, to provide not merely for themselves, but for those they loved. Martha's youngest, now teetering on toddling steps, clutched Jeremiah's hand as he taught him to walk along the cabin's edge, laughter spilling like water over stone. The bond deepened with every day of shared labor and quiet triumph. Jeremiah proposed formally, not in a grand display, but with simple sincerity, a promise of protection, partnership, and respect, offered to a woman who had known little but hardship. Martha, weary but hopeful, accepted. Her sons, cheering and laughing, surrounded them, their voices filling the cabin and valley with a promise that the future could be brighter, kinder, and hold by midsummer. The valley was alive with the rhythm of work, laughter, and resilience. The children, under Jeremiah's guidance, had grown into capable hunters and helpers. Martha, towering and formidable, had become the cornerstone of a homestead that now radiated warmth, strength, and hope. The town, initially skeptical and cruel, could not deny the sight of thriving children, a happy union, and a household built on mutual respect and love. Whispers of admiration began to replace gossip, and neighbors who once scorned Martha now sought her counsel or assistance. Her strength, once a source of fear, became a symbol of endurance and courage. Martha and Jeremiah's bond, forged in the harsh fires of survival, blossomed fully. They moved together in tandem, their routines synchronized like the pulse of the mountains themselves. Evenings by the fire became a ritual, laughter, stories, gentle teasing, and the warmth of hands clasped in silent understanding. Sometimes they would steal away to a hidden glade, the sun casting gold over their faces, sharing moments of quiet intimacy and tenderness, the kind that grows slowly but endures fiercely. The children thrived, not merely as offspring, but as extensions of their parents' strength. Each boy learned to track, hunt, and protect, guided by Jeremiah's patient hand and Martha's unyielding wisdom. Their bond with their mother deepened, tempered by discipline, affection, and the knowledge that they were no longer alone against the world. Martha often recalled her past, the ex-husband, the cold streets, the hunger and fear, and felt a fierce gratitude that her sons had found both safety and purpose. Jeremiah had not only provided shelter, but had become a partner in the truest sense, sharing the burdens of labor, protecting them against the cruelty of the world, and nurturing the sparks of love that had lain dormant in her heart. One evening, as the sun set in a riot of gold and crimson, casting long shadows over the valley, Martha stood with Jeremiah at the edge of their land. Her children played nearby, their laughter carried on the warm summer breeze. She rested her hand on his strong arm, feeling the steady pulse beneath the skin, the security that had once seemed impossible. "I never thought we could have this," she whispered, voice trembling with awe and relief. Jeremiah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We earned it, together." They embraced, the mountains around them standing witness to a love forged in hardship, tempered by adversity, and protected by courage. The wind carried the scent of pine and earth, a reminder that life, though often cruel, could still reward those who endured, who persevered, and who loved with courage. In the days and years that followed, their homestead flourished. The children grew strong, capable, and kind, each a testament to the resilience instilled by their mother and stepfather. Martha and Jeremiah worked side by side, their love deepening with each challenge, each triumph, each quiet moment of connection. The town eventually accepted them, not fully, but enough to allow their lives to unfold in peace. And so, on that sun-warmed summer evening, with the peaks ablaze in color and the laughter of children echoing through the valley, Martha allowed herself to hope. For the first time in her life, she could see a future unshadowed by cruelty, one built on kindness, strength, and unwavering love. She had shelter, her children had purpose, and she had a man who matched her heart for heart, strength for strength. The mountains held them safe, the sun warmed them, and the wind whispered blessings across a family united, not merely by blood, but by courage, endurance, and a love that had weathered every storm.